Okay, so I think I told you that that all of high-performing companies work with stage gates, and they actually do. Some of the companies that I've been with have always implemented stage gates. I come out of Syngenta. I was the head of the vegetable group there, and it was really good because at the end of the day, when I said I'm at stage 2, everybody knew I was at what that meant. Now, stage 2 for cassava will mean completely different than stage 2 for corn, but there's a common philosophy of where you are with stage 2. And so I'll give you an example of that. Recently we had a meeting in the rice community at Erie in India, and this young breeder came up, and he was a traits breeder. He was not a breeder, he was a traits person. We call them trait project leads as opposed to breeding project leads. And he stood up at the audience and he says, I have this trait, and he gave a nice presentation on the trait. And then I asked him, well, on a scale because we were introducing that stage gate 1 through 6, and he said, well, it's about a 2. I said, most people hearing what you just said, think it's like a 4 and a 5, that they'll actually get it. So the gate system actually removes false expectations. Because what he should have said, I'm at a stage gate 2 on this, or at a stage 2, which would have said, we went through discovery about it. And so that's all we know about it. But when he did that, he was overselling his product. So this is really valuable. So I don't want to oversell where we are in module 1, because we're just at stage gate 1. So at this point, I'm introducing this in the hopes of co-developing with the people that are part of this community here. So you all will help me get to stage gate 2. And when I get to stage gate 2, I'll start working on the toolbox and the format design. So it's all about a standardization. So I hope that you feel that you're not going to lose your individuality of your crop when we go to these stage gates, because these stage gates are just common gates. It's just, like I said, everybody will have to design their own stage gates for their own crops, but they all have to line up. The animal people have to line up with the corn people and then the cassava people. So by the end of 2018, I will have, hopefully, everything wired. Actually, there's no reason why I couldn't, because we got off to a slow start because we were doing this on a part-time basis. So right now, we're at stage gate 1. I should be at stage gate 6 by the time the year is over with. And I'll have, hopefully, when I say hopefully, I don't mean that. I mean, we will deliver manuals and we'll deliver guidance on how this should be created. But more important, my hope is that we would then teach people this process. So when I went to, we work with the Bangladesh Rice Research Institute. It's called BIRI. And when they saw this presentation they were doing from the government's sake, the Department of the Chancellor of Agriculture wanted to come to see what a product advancement project looks like. And we're going to go into that when we have these discussions, not today. So we had high level in the morning. This is a medium level, and then we'll go deeper into it in the rest of the week. But it's really valuable once you go through a product advancement meeting, because you bring in all the people that are associated with that crop. So then what happens is everybody knows what's going on a genetics level. And then you're also able to then manage how many products you're actually releasing. Because earlier, I said there's a paradox of choice. And so we have somehow gotten off track, because I think we've associated with releases to success. In the private organizations, more excessive releases means just an extra amount of money. And companies go bankrupt because they have too much inventory. That's because they release too many products for their customers. So what happens is every time you advance a product, You put it in the warehouse, it doesn't make any money, so consequently your money's tied up in product that's not being used. So what I wanted to show, go ahead. You get points for the first question.
Now, I just want to ask something. You know, when you go to America, Dow AgroSciences, for example, we visited them, and we realized that they develop, you know, genetically modified materials.
Mm-hmm.
And to just have one, how do you call it? Okay, how do you call it? Yeah, no.
One stage gate.
Yes. By the time you think the money they put in, it's like the whole money for an African government running the whole nation. So I perfectly agree with you that bringing out products, if you are going to be releasing like that, then bringing out a product which is not necessary or a variety which is not useful, counting the amount of money you sink in and then produce something which is not useful. Maybe also in our context, we are not saying that maybe the money we even have, it's not enough to start something with. I don't know if you are understanding. But
Yeah. I just thought you had the budget of Dow AgroScience. I didn't realize that you were short compared to Dow. So I have to really rethink this. No. Actually, this is a mental thing, you know. And so it's not about. Somebody asked me, well, how much money do you budget into it? It's really just a different way of working, and there's going to be some additional administration where you record the amount of varieties. But the level that Dow is working, especially on the biotechnology part of it, they have a stage gate. It's a uniform stage gate across the world, 1 through 5. I think, biotech, I think, is GM is 1 through 5. But really, at the end, I really don't think I'm selling you a expensive tool. I'm just, in the cost of being, here's what we've learned. The cost of implementing that, the money that you save in mistakes pays for the system. So trust me on this, it's not a high cost implementation of this. Yeah. And for example, the Gates Foundation is really, it has been really, Gary Atlin has really been supportive of this. So I think in some of the Gates Foundation, so you work in CASAPA, right? Yes. So I think from the case of project management within the next gen CASAPA, this could be something incorporated quite easily. And so when we do this in the next RICE program with Gates, we're probably going to be putting in things called, like project managers and implementing this stage gate system. Yeah, it's less about I'm not going to provide a computer system. I'm just going to provide a way of working. But that's a good point.
On that point of resources, it's probably worth pointing out that it will take some time and effort, maybe not money, but time and effort to do this, but you're totally right. It is effort and time very well spent.
Yeah.
So that's the first point. The second point is that when it actually comes to hard resources, to George's point that the Gates Foundation are really keen on this, the funders are going to lap this up because a lot of them have had exposure to private industry, and like George said, I mean, whether you're Boeing or whether you're making washing machines, this is a very standard way of operating for product development. And so when the funders see this, they're going to lap it up. And so the hope from Excellence in Breeding is that once this is implemented, it'll be just one of the ways in which you can hopefully attract a greater level of funding going forward.
Let me build on that a little bit because I agree with you. We've increased, we're launched this Excellence in Breeding because our funders have lost trust in us. The funders have lost trust in our professionalism. So it doesn't mean what we're doing is bad. Don't ever think that. Don't think that that's what I'm thinking. It's just that I think we have to repackage the way we do things to develop a professionalism. So when we implemented this within Syngenta, I was really good at this with vegetables. So when management saw what we were doing with vegetables, they gave me more money than some of the other crops. Because at the end of the day, they want to make sure that they're getting a better return on investment And if you can show them a better way, I think it's going to give them a more of a trusting environment. So in many cases, we're doing this because if you don't do it, I think it's going to hurt us. Well, you first.
No, it's just to say, I mean, when we did the presentation, we did the CG system. I have tried to sort of use the stage gate most of the time. But the biggest challenge normally is present it in a way that the breeder is actually the one who started from A to Z. You don't have to say the advancement meetings. You actually do advancement meetings on your own. You actually advance the materials without even consulting anyone. So all those things, when you do the presentation, if you can take that into consideration, that in the CGA, normally the breeder is the one who manages from stage 1 to stage 6.
And look how well they're doing.
So there are no product managers or portfolio managers who actually help you.
Right.
You make decisions on your own. You don't need to go present advancement sort of committee except when releasing the variety. So you should probably put that into consideration.
What does that mean? Does that mean I shouldn't do it?
No.
Okay.
You should put that in consideration when presenting. Because we always find it very difficult.
Okay, so Monsanto, it's really interesting. In the Monsanto, Mike Olson comes from Monsanto Farm, and I asked him how he did it. And he said that they had one person overseeing the system, but in many cases you had to present to all the breeding community. And in Monsanto, you were fighting for slots because Monsanto said they can only afford to launch 2 things globally. So the breeders had to come and they had to make the presentations of what their lines were. And so it was almost self-governing, but there was a governing person to make sure that things are done. So here's what I'll give you a story. There was and I think that I'll share with you some of the ideas so for product profile, I think everybody has gamed the product profile system. And when I use the term gamed, I mean that everybody says that they have one, and if you look at the bottom of their drawer in their office, I think everybody has product profiles there. So I think that that's the key word. Yes, I've got them, but I've seen cases where launches have been made from different CG systems, and then it gets to the point where we're doing these crop cafeterias where we bring in growers and regions, and we show them what we have, and we find that what we launched has nothing to do with what the growers are wanting. So the seed companies come up and say, what am I going to do with this? Okay, so according to the breeder, he said, yes, I've got product profiles. And in reality is they were someplace in the bottom of his drawer. And I think when you put this system in place, you always have to be asking yourself as a breeder, does it align with the products for the variety replacement strategy? Now you have a different problem. Your problem is the variety turnover within Western Africa is really stagnating, which means that there's not a pull-through of the product. So really, at the end of the day, very few people are looking for product because we haven't generated a buzz or we haven't generated a need for new product. And so the big challenge we have when we develop a variety replacement strategy is we have to be clever in what we designed to get it into the marketplace, which actually goes against the whole argument of flooding a stagnant market with product. I mean, you might as well stop breeding because unless you come up with some game-changing, you should not even be wasting your time breeding. So it's a stagnant market. So things like, so I was at one time managing lettuce in the Netherlands. So a variety lasts in the Netherlands about 2 years total. It's 1 year it peaks and the next year it's already going out. You know, we were all about speed. We were all about getting new product into market. The growers were pulling that product into their production because they needed the newest and best downy mildew resistance. That is not describing the growers you deal with. So that means you have to sit back and ask yourself, How do I deliver to a grower who has yet to perceive the value of my variety? Does that make sense? And you are from which crop? From where? Okay. Good. I'm sorry. Actually, for me to get to know, introduce yourself and tell me what you do.
So I'm Peter Kaleko, cassava breeder at IITA. I have a lot of questions about product design. One of the things, like we had a convening here, and a flour processor listed the traits that he wanted in a cassava variety, and he listed about 26 traits or something like that. And you made the comment that we're not talking about a Boeing 777, but it's not a Boeing 777. It's still a fairly complex. A crop variety has many attributes to it, and a lot of them are quite important. And then in a breeding program, you can deal with 3 or 4 traits maximum, if you have a good selection index or something. So otherwise you're doing something that's extremely long-term. So the question is how to really effectively focus in on an effective product design that still lists all of these 26 important traits. They're still all there, but your product won't end up having all those. It'll be an imperfect.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. So thank you for saying that. So what we've done with product development is we've created this thing called a straw man. So the definition of a straw man for me is that it's something that you create to destroy. So it's the perfect variety. So what we've done in product profiles is actually list the 26 varieties that would make a perfect variety. So everybody knows as a breeder, there is no such thing as a perfect variety. And if a breeder is trying to achieve perfection, they might as well retire because they'll be frustrated for the rest of their career. So what I'm advocating in a variety replacement strategy is you narrow that down to prioritization, and you have to only limit yourself to the important traits, prioritized traits that will get you into the marketplace. In one of my presentations, I have this picture of these guys running behind a rhino, and in the slide I say you don't have to be fast. You just have to be faster than the slowest guy in the group. And so when we design a variety, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be better than what's out there. So the big challenge you have is a lot of times you don't know what's out there, one, and I think we have to address that to understand what the slowest person in the pack looks like. And then in an area where you have low variety turnover or stagnated market, you really then have to be very good at developing something that is significantly better than what's out there. So people are getting caught in the trap. And, I did this in the evolution of a product profile in the commercial world. People describe the perfect variety. But then we looked at it and said, but you're not here to develop the perfect variety. You're just here to develop a variety that's significantly better than the ones everyone is using. Does that make sense? So I think at one point, it's a good exercise, and we call it a trait prioritization exercise, but it's not something of value when you really want to displace the leading variety in the market. Okay, so I cannot tell you how happy I am because we only got to slide 1, and we have significantly good conversation. So hopefully by the time this is over with, you will have a really good understanding. And remember the rule: if you don't say anything, that means you're in total agreement with me. Oh, okay. So I was told everybody here that the cutoff was that you had to be fast thinkers. So if you're not fast thinkers, you better catch it up. Okay.
I have a point.
Was there somebody a question? Okay.
My name is Maxwell. I'm a rice breeder from Ghana.
Okay.
You talked about donors losing trust in some of the things we do. Maybe not exactly the same words, but
no, I said that. I said that exactly.
Yeah, but what I've found out is that sometimes the economies in our countries is so bad that it doesn't really make our work very impactful. I can give an example.
It doesn't make your what?
The impact of our work.
Yeah,
shape.
yeah.
So for example, in Ghana, people like jasmine type of rice. We have developed and released varieties which are jasmine type. The challenge we had was that we didn't have good milling facilities around, which could mill as the ones from Vietnam and India. So you have a variety which is at par with the imported variety, but the investment in the country is not making your work impactful.
Yeah.
And then now we have had a few people with money entering into the industry, and the game is beginning to change. So sometimes our economies itself is a huge problem.
Oh, I agree with you, and I think you're particularly challenged because you're dealing with something you can't even control. You're dealing with export rice coming in that's grown that's grown for a market, developed for a market, and you're getting it, and it's fragrant rice, and they have the best milling or better milling operations out of Thailand, for example. Yeah, I think eventually, I can't solve those problems. I can't solve all the problems, but in that particular case, I think that the Gates recognizes that. Potentially, you can write that into the next budget, but it is one of those crosses you're going to have to bear until that catches up. So here's what I know about the free market, is if there is money to be made, and if you've got the varieties in place that could do that, then when that happens, I think you're going to be able to provide that system with the new varieties. And so I think we have to look at, I can't help you out there. I
think, George...
okay.
I think it's worth pointing out again that the impact is through providing a better version of what's currently out there. Yes, turning the market around towards better milling varieties is going to be a longer term process, and you need to have the germplasm to respond to that when that time comes. But right now, they're growing something, and as breeders, we've got the ability to give them a better version of what they're currently growing, and so I think, again, the risk is trying to do too much. In this case, try and take on the whole market and create a new market. That'll happen over time, like George said. Yeah. But for now, let's stick to what we know we can do, and that's provide a better version of what's currently being grown.
But the challenge with that is that both your government and donors are blaming you, that they are not seeing the effect of your work.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think when it comes back down to it is, I think when you're up against an export market and you don't even know, you can't even, it's not even fighting fair, because they're bringing product in that's been designed over years. Yeah, I struggle. I feel for you, okay? But it's not in scope with this project. Hopefully, let's take this offline. But it's a good challenge.
And it's something that, excellence in breeding is in a powerful position to be a communication tool to funders. And this is a message that we can give them, that just to manage expectations of what can and can't be achieved through breeding. And because this is not a rice only issue, and so this is somewhere excellence in breeding can bring this argument across all the crops together and say, hey, breeding can provide better varieties. Breeding is not going to suddenly create investment in mills that currently isn't there. Over time, perhaps it can respond to that investment to ensure that germplasm is there. But you have to realise the limitations. They have to realise the limitations, and that's something we can be a part of.
Anyway, I'm hopeful because it's beginning to change here.
Okay, so I wanted to bring people up to speed. So my first slide was to give realistic expectations right now, in that we're at basically stage one of this project. But because of the experience that we've had in developing this stage gate, we'll accelerate rather quickly as soon as we get this sensitizing email or sensitizing meetings out. and getting the feedback. So the other thing that we're pushing for within Module 1 is we feel that one of the big gaps is on product management. And in product management, it's the ability to actually understand where the products go, looking at the weaknesses of the products that you release, and then taking that information back into the breeding program. And that's really valuable because I just don't think it's lacking. I think it's lacking. So what we've done was we've invested in one. We're going to have a position called product management. I hope to land it in Africa. I don't know where it's going to land in Africa, but the whole idea there is to provide that feedback loop as an example. So it's not going to take care of everybody's program, but it's an example that it will be used as an example of this is a future investment. So every time I've gone to Seattle and talked to Gates, they're going to be on board with this. So for the next gen project, I think it's something that should be included into that project. In the rice projects, we're actually including a product manager. And the product manager is basically the captain of the team and oversees, it actually oversees, in some of the cases, the stage gate process. So it's really important in the commercial world because that person is there to deliver a product and to get the information to the breeders to make sure it could be achieved. And that person is really interesting. So in the commercial world, and I'm just trying to relay the parallels between commercial and public, but that person becomes the spokesman because it's not a breeder, of developing products. That person becomes a spokesperson of why aren't we delivering product, and it could be something like what you're saying. But that individual is far enough away from the breeding program that he or she has more objective views of things. And so when I look at what the role of product management is basically, it's a coordinating of activities across the product, the stage gate system. It feeds information from the product introduction back to the design. And to me, anything here after 5 and 6 is a black box for most of the breeders within the CG community. Then additionally, what the product management we want to do is to be able to characterize the value of your new germplasm so we can better position it into the market. And hopefully that will be a very limited offering because the more you offer, the more diluted your message is. And the more diluted your message is, the customer or the client doesn't hear you anymore. So this is how I see the product management position being developed. This is how we're going to try to develop in the new rice project within the Gates. And I think Africa Rice should be considering the same thing for their operations. Because at the end of the day, anybody who enters into the CG system from the commercial side, the first thing that they see a lack of is not good breeders. They see a lack of a black hole for products. And these are the most important people within the commercial world because they are the eyes and ears of the breeders. Okay, so now let me go into my presentation. And I just wanted to give you an update on that. So let me go into the presentation and we'll break it down into a little bit more of a discussion. So you heard my dog and pony show for 15 minutes this morning. Now, what I want you to take a look at it and say, George, that doesn't make sense. Explain it to me a little bit more. So I always work on what problems we're trying to solve and what problems we're trying to solve within this module 1. And so what I want to do is develop a common language. And a common language, oh yes, go. No, don't. Just jump in there.
Step back a bit. But
and who are you?
I'm David DeCoyer, yam breeder, IITA.
You got very kind eyes. I kept looking at you during my morning presentation, and you either fooled me or you were really interested in what I had to say.
Absolutely, I'm
okay.
very interested in what you're saying. And one of the questions, I know we've had discussions here in IITA about what is the role of CG centers in variety release.
A good question.
So, I think can we maybe have some discussion about, like, when your product pipeline makes the assumption that we're involved from the beginning to the end, or maybe IITA or CG has a role in germplasm development, or I think is that paradigm changed? Or?
No, it hasn't changed, and I think it's different for each CG systems. So in Erie, we do release varieties, but we also release germplasm. And so one of the things that I have to respect, the system is a good system. I think what happens is those that are releasing germplasm have to be hand in glove with our NARS partners. And I don't have one position which is better, whether you're releasing products or your germplasm or what. But the trick is when you're handing products off to the NARS program, what I'm trying to get across here is that if the CG system is working completely independent of our NARS program, stop breeding and save us money, But because I think when I see a system that all of a sudden just launches things to the NARS program, and I say, well, why are you doing that? They're not part of your world of interaction. I almost want to say stop spending the money and give it to somebody who can better use it. So I don't think it's exclusive of what CGs have what strategy. I think what the Gates Foundation and Gary, if people know and love Gary Atlin in this room, Gary is constantly pushing to me to say, this is not about CG. It is about that connection between the CG and the So I think that in your case, and the question you have is, you have to make sure that the same common language is implemented across the NARS programs, and that you fit within that NARS-CG partnership. So yes, this isn't exclusive for variety releases, and I'm not here to say the CG should do this or that. All I'm saying is the system has to fit. And so when you do a product design, if you don't have a NARS people in the room, then give me the money and rice, because I think what you're going to do is develop something that nobody's going to want, because you don't have that cross-functional team with the product design. Does that raise any? And you are?
I'm Angarawe from IITA. Well, to buttress what you are saying, in response to my colleague, the product development is based on national strategy, which, whether the CG Center, the NAS system, they have a kind of role and mandate. And in that respect, whatever you are doing at the CG is for that particular national strategy to be met. So there is that need, just like you said, the common language as to where do you converge and how do you systematically work out the variety or product design to be able to meet that national strategy. And I think there is no gainsay to that effect.
What was that? I missed that point.
There is no gainsay as to, because the rule is that the national partners work with the CG centers and get a desired product that will be released through the national program.
Right.
That's why I said whatever product design from the CG works based on national strategy.
Exactly. So at the end of the moment, just to let you know, this is not necessarily, we're starting off with the CG, but our whole group, our whole goal is to go into the NARS as partnerships with the CG. And that's what I mean by that first bullet point there. It's a common language. So really, at the end of the day, if you really want to develop a level of professionalism, you have to have this common language. And within Syngenta, like I said earlier, all you had to do is say, I'm at stage 2. Everybody knew where you were. And what I would like to do at the end of this project is to have us hand in glove with the commonality of a stage gate system. So Michael first, and then you're second.
I just want to make the point that the product profile has nothing to do with the national strategy. The product profile is informed by the market intelligence that tells you what it will take to get a variety grown. So if the national strategy is for a bunch of traits that don't actually trigger adoption, that's not the product profile. The product profile is looking at usually what is currently being grown and why it's being grown. And sometimes there'll be deviation from that because sometimes there's a required trait that market intelligence will say, if you had this trait, adoption would take off. So yeah, I just want to make that point that the national strategy is sometimes a distraction, and they can say they'd like what they want. At the end of the day, breeders need to be developing what's going to get grown, because if what they're saying they want developed, if it doesn't get grown, it doesn't have impact.
So let me build on that. So I may have confused this whole situation. So this product management position that I was talking about, that's servicing not just the CG centers, it's servicing the CG centers' partnership with the NARS. So our whole goal there is to get back to where Michael was talking about, is that position will help identify what the customer wants. Now, this is different. I'm going to say something that's really blasphemous, but sometimes when I deal with our social science division, they circle above the problem that breeders have. So they have very, very good research dedicated to the village level or the town level. But a lot of times when breeders go into that, they can't really use that information because it's not about products. It's about transactions. It's about who's making decisions. And so what I really think at the end of the day is somebody who's being product-oriented, why it's working, why it's not working, and why it goes back to the breeders or the team. So, just to build upon what you were saying is, if we look at the NARS CG interaction, it is a team. You know, it really is a team, and that we in the commercial world try to lower the impact of, lower the authority of the breeders, and again, this is blasphemy. Lower the authority of the breeders to work as a team, because all research shows that unless the scientist is smarter than the collective group of minds within the team, then the team is more powerful than the individual scientist. And that's been, so over here, and then I'll talk to you. Okay, so I do have to say, we're only on slide 3. No, but I look at that as really powerful, because at the end of the day, if you don't understand where this is going and speak up, then it's a waste of my time and a waste of your time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is the common language.
You didn't introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Damien. I'm a cassava breeder from National Crop. So, like you said, the most important is teamwork. You know, between the CG centers and the NARIs, and then using the common language. As for release or no release, it has never been a problem in Nigeria, for instance. And at the end of the day, both NARIs and CG centers work together and they get the credits. It doesn't like credits. So it has never been an issue. It's never been a problem as to who release, because each country has a system of release.
Right.
So they follow the system, and we've been working together.
Well, I'm glad that you said that. Let me build a little bit on that, because this week we had a contributors meetings in Kenya, and I had a breeder from the CG system was saying that, oh, our NARS partners are weak, and they felt like they were doing everything. At one point you have to ask yourself, if they're not really interested in working with you, find the people who are, because there's nothing better than a partnership where everybody is developing. So the big issue then I have is not then on the collaboration between the CG and the NARS partners. It may be on the amount of product being released and whether you've got that product characterized for impact. So I was surprised to hear that 66% of the cassava within Nigeria are all modern day genetics, which I think is good. If it's true, it's a testimony of getting product into the Nigerian market. And I thought that the variety turnover rate within Nigeria was not healthy. Healthy being rapid turnover, because when you have rapid turnover, you have growth and you have profitability. Sir. And your name is?
I am Wendy from IITA, a maize breeder.
Okay.
Do you think there should be like a product pipeline development difference between the public research institutions and the private sectors?
So my feeling on that is whether you're Maytag making washers or Boeing making vehicles, I think that the pipeline, that the way of managing it is the right way to manage it. So when you go to Edgett and Cooper's book system on stage gates, you will see that the significantly important reasons of why you should be developing in the stage gate. And eventually I'm going to have a slide to show you the reasons why the stage gates are valuable. So it really doesn't matter whether it's commercial or public. It doesn't matter whether it's washing machines or varieties. It's a system that is what high-performing organizations do. So I don't see that. And the only reason is I don't want you to get this feeling just because I come from the commercial world, this is what we should do. I have to tailor it to what works here and respect the ways of working within the CG-NARS partnerships. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, this has been really good. I hope people aren't too bored here. So,
I'll just make one comment. David brought up a really good point about the model, and you responded with a spot-on answer that needs to be hand in glove with the NARS. That also assumes that the NARS that once the NARS decide on a variety that needs to be grown, that there's a pipeline that works to get from there to growers, and that's not always the case. And so this is a challenging problem that probably needs to be addressed at the institution level. But I think that the concept of having fewer varieties helps with that problem, because if you have one gangbuster variety that's released maybe every, say, 5 years, then a real marketing strategy can be put behind that, or perhaps there can be some private-public partnership with a seed company to get it to market.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer would be, but I do believe that having fewer higher value products will help with that problem. But it is a problem that's worth recognising, because many of you are having to deal with it, where you're developing really good varieties, not just even a large amount of germ placement. You might settle on a really good variety, but then the pipeline might be broken in some cases, and it needs to be addressed.
And so it's interesting, once you implement the stage gate system, I think your conversation changes. Your conversation changes from, it's not really a product advancement activity, it becomes an impact activity. So you begin to recognize that it may not have anything to do with the varieties at that point in the time, in the evolution of the client base. And I think one of the things that would be healthy is to have these conversations that go across not just a single breeder, but go across the whole system, from the NARS partners to the pathologists to the entomologists to people that know, to the seed systems or to the seed companies that handle your product. Okay, so these are the problems I'm trying to solve with that, with going into this. So just a quick reminder that when you evaluate what high-performing companies do or organizations do versus low-performing, the good ones understand the customers, and they are 4.6% better impact, higher impact, when they understand the customers than those that don't understand the customers. For upfront planning, those that plan in advance have 1.6 times greater impact than those that don't. And so we spend a lot of time in the world that I come from in planning. So, my mother always taught me, measure twice, cut once the fabric. Sometimes I think when you have individuals making decisions, you react too quickly. So this upfront planning allows us to bring in a more of a person, more opinions. The impact of metrics, 4.6, so that when we start talking about genetic gains later in the afternoon, it's a perplexing story. I think when people started using that as a measure of productivity, I think everybody rushed to get a number, but at the end of the day, the commercial people aren't looking at it that way. They're looking at it as, I changed something within the breeding program, what was my impact? So they have a very different perspective on measuring genetic gains that gets you it quicker, but maybe not as accurate, but then over time, you begin to see the picture a little bit more. And then finally, I am such a big proponent of cross-functional conversations, because not all breeders have all the information. And when you spend the time talking about all the things that breeders have to do with, with the Gobi or with B4R or BMS, breeders are asked to do much more than the ancestors of the CG system when it was simple. I always was told, in the industry, that all the single gene easy stuff was done by these breeders back in the 70s. So right now a breeder today has to be a really good breeder, because the people who did it in the 70s were all single gene people. So the impact was a lot more simple back then. Good, tell me, your dad was,
On impact of metrics, like you said, variety advancement process. I'm asking for staple crop, like maize, sorghum, wheat, whatever. And then quality rather than quantity, you say. For example, if I go to farmers with quality protein maize or provitamin A maize, it is quality, but the quantity, if the yield is not really there, I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, so now that wasn't quality.
Is there any trade-off somewhere there?
No, that wasn't quality of the variety. That was the quality of the releases to the public, through the...
Oh, the release process?
Yeah, it's the release. Okay. So what I'm saying is, what we have said, what I've seen, is that the more product of lower quality you push through, you'd be better off to save the money and wait until... So we had bad incentives. In fact, in many cases, our incentives are geared towards total releases, and we have to change that. So I think that in some cases the incentives are to release more, but you're actually hurting the chances of variety turnover and impact. So that quality was the quality of the release, not the quantity of it. But I hear what you're saying when it comes to, you can't, you have to maintain a higher level of yield, a competitive level of yield.
I also have a question on the understanding the customer. This is where the breeder and the marketing team fight in the private sector. You see, the marketing team will always say, we want to grow the varieties the farmers want. And the farmers always want old varieties. And if you look at most of the companies like Monsanto, Pioneer, those companies in Africa, they're the oldest varieties. I know Sitco is one of the oldest varieties. These were actually released before I was even born. But the production department will be saying, the farmers want this variety, you have to produce it, and you have to maintain the efficiency. So that's why I don't understand it very well. Well, that's what the problem is.
So I agree with you. So at the end of the day, if you like some of the companies, they will. Here's what I know about companies. They're there to maximize profit, right? And if a variety, if the market isn't pulling through and requesting real change, you may not get the pull through that would require them to change their variety portfolio. However, that's not going to last. And I think that as you professionalize and the market professionalizes, you will begin to see you'll begin to see a change in the portfolio of the products. So I think what you're saying right now, I would say would be true, but I do think that Monsanto is here not to sell old varieties, or Pioneer is here not to sell old varieties. They're poised for the next generation of genetics. So the big argument I have is, if the CG is here releasing products, are they helping it, or should we be being more precision on the varieties that were released? Hey, do you have any comments on Monsanto and the variety turnovers? Because I think in this area here, you don't have the variety turnovers that you do in the Corn Belt.
Yeah, to add to the point that George is trying to make, I think, if I'm catching along the same line of thought, is that when we think about introducing products to the farmer, the genetic base, the genetics is a huge part of it, but so are all the additional components to that product profile in terms of where is it going to be planted, who's planting it, and how are they managing it. So, and what seed trimming, or what chemistry, or what agronomic practices will be used by the farmer. So we have to understand that whole system first before we can disseminate a particular type of genetics and, in our case, trait package on top. So absolutely, it's more than just the genetics. Of course, that is a big piece. But the testing strategy that goes along the rest of the pipeline is indeed a huge part of it as well.
So their conservative nature of the varieties that they're putting out, I think that's the position. That's where we are today, and I've seen that in other industries. And then as soon as the production capabilities change, then I think new products will be released. So I hear you. I think that that's the case. But then the question is, if that's the case, launching more and more products in a shotgun way is probably not the way to get around that. I think you have to be clever on what you want to release. I see I haven't convinced you, but we'll come back to it. So,
my name is Late Breeder, and I think the problem is not that the breeders do not know what the customers want. In most of these programs, the scientists are working closely with the national partners, and we interact with them, we visit them. They also come over to look at breeding materials, and what normally are released, at least for maize, are the best, and they take into consideration what the farmer wants. The problem is that the national program, national government, most of them are not funding research. So, for example, in Ghana, several hybrids have been released, and yet you will find out that only a few of them are in production, because we don't have well-established seed companies to provide good quality seed. The seed is mostly not available. The problem is not that we don't know what the customers want.
So let me just say something. So I think you're right, but you're from maize, and I think of all the crops that we work in the CG system, I think because you're working with maize in connection with the whole maize industry, I think you probably know customers better than anyone else, because you could not survive with the philosophy of working in the dark like some of the other crops. So what I've learned in all this is that the maize people probably are closer to where we need to be. And so it's great that you could celebrate that, but there's a large amount of the CG crops that would love to be where maize is today. So I agree with you, but I look at maize as with an asterisk, saying they're probably, if they weren't close enough, or they weren't using the commercial world already as a benchmark, then you shouldn't even be breeding maize. Okay? And I think that the issue regarding policy, we had that discussion with Gates, and I think that they're actually going to be trying to get more involved with the government policy in agriculture. But again, I can't solve that problem, but I can solve the better ways of working. And so what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to throw away this better way of working within the stage gates. And according to my CIMIT friends who are in Maze, they have something similar. They have a product advancement meetings. But I think that across the CG centers, probably we could do, one of the aspirations is working like the Maze Group does, because the Maze Group is competing against the commercial world. And in many cases, if you're in cassava, there's no commercial breeding program. So how am I supposed to react to that? Oh, no, there's a person right behind you raising his hand. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm just trying to respond to your last statement in respect to challenges depending on crops. I can give you a vivid example where private partnership changed the scenario of sorghum adoption in the north. When the industrialists changed their production from using wheat to sorghum, the demand changed and the preference also came up, which is white grains with non-tester. And when those were found out in some of our products, the adoption changed because on the platform, farmers were invited to produce and aggregated for the processor. So in that respect, the understanding of consumers or customers is very, very valid in this, so that whatever product we are designing, the industrialists who are also off-takers should also be considered as part of the process and decision making.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so just remember, I am not the devil here. I mean, you don't have to raise your hand to say, I think you're wrong. I mean, I respect your opinion, and ultimately, I'm going to turn this around and try to make it so it fits everybody's needs. But I'm not here, this is not a you against me, So I just want to bring that, because you will win. I'll get murdered here. Here and then there.
Sorry, I have an issue with, the idea of releasing maybe one variety over a time. From what you have said, a situation where you have donors and their interest is for you to release varieties, maybe 3, 4, 5. And you are telling them, if I release 3 or 4 or 5, there will be glut or their consumers will not take them. You are advocating for one. The donor may not be interested.
I think there's an education problem that has to go on, because when you can explain that the one had been higher profiled and more strategic in replacing the varieties on the market, I think donors, at least the Gates Foundation is saying to me that they would rather have a system in place where the best gets modified, or the best gets out there to compete against what the market leader is. And so I think what you're saying is true. People are saying, let's continue to dump things into the market. And I do call it dumping. And at one point you can say, well, I released 3 varieties. I had one breeder tell me that in his lifetime, and in a short lifetime because he was younger than I was, he released 150 varieties. Yes. And I looked at him and I said, I've met whole departments that have never released 150 varieties. What he was saying to me is, I dump onto the marketplace, And so his products were not being uptake because nobody knew what the good ones were, and no one's going to spend time doing it. So there's these extremes that are out there. I do think that, what's your market that you breed for location-wise? Nigeria? Okay, so Nigeria can only handle a certain amount of new products. You just have to make sure that you say, this is the best one I have, and then you put effort behind it to get it going. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I struggle a little bit between future forecasting and understanding what the current consumers want. Because one of the reasons why varieties aren't adopted is maybe they don't have the quality attributes to make the traditional products that 70 to 80% of the farmers are using. But then there's also the future, modernization of agriculture, a disease, like in cassava, there's a disease, a virus disease in East Africa that's clearly a high priority. That virus disease is not present yet in West Africa, and we want to preemptively breed for resistance to this disease. No consumer tells you that they want that, right? And yeah, we think it's an important insurance policy, but we don't even know. I mean, hopefully the disease will never even get here. So how you balance sort of
So you balance it,
forecasting?
again, when we understand the market better, and this is where I think that if you look at the CG, we have to begin to shift resources away from breeding. Because at the end, if you're not evaluating the genetic variability, then really we're just playing with breeding. So let me go back to your question. So when I refer to a variety replacement strategy, that's one component of developing and designing a new product. The other component that you have to look at is understanding the market changes that are afoot. And I think at that point, you have to design a product that, again, you can't have the list of 26 things. You should be developing a strategy of identifying the traits or the resistances to be ready to pop into that variety. So I think there's two components, and sometimes I get lost or I lose people when I start talking about there's a variety replacement strategy, that's the known, what everybody's out there. And in your cases, I don't even know the known. But what I do believe is that there's another component of that is trying to predict the market. So when you get better milling quality, there's better mills, I mean, that will change the market, and you have to be predicting that change or assessing that change as well. So early on, we were talking about breeding for management. Oh no, we weren't talking about it. I was thinking about that when your DG was talking. So one of the things that I think we overlook is breeding for management. And if you look at Erie with rice, I mean, basically, Erie's success in IR8 was breeding for management. So the management changed because we started to add more nitrogen, which made our current varieties lodge, okay? I think that one of the components that we're missing is actually breeding for the future management changes. And that's an example, I think, is predicting the market and predicting the direction. And eventually you get to a slide there where I say you've got to kick the ball to where the player is going to be, not where he is right now. So you have two strategies. One, kicking the ball to where the player is, which is the variety replacement strategy, or putting it up a little bit closer to the goal. The other one is understanding what the market is, changes are, and you're really beginning to develop a product for that market. But the problem is, it's always risky breeding too. I mean, and because you never know, and you know, I've always had a pathologist tell me you need 3 years of the same disease, the same virus that hits you before you should start breeding for it. And you know what? He was probably closer to right than me wanting to, as a young breeder, pop in a new virus resistance. Because again, predicting, you have to understand the real market, and sometimes you just have to count on luck. But that was a really good point when it comes to the creating a product profile. One should be flexible enough to say, this is the variety we're going to try to displace. Because if you don't do that, I think you're just breeding again. But the other one is purposeful breeding for what changes within the market. So as I sit here, this is like 20 plus years of experience. I can only tell you, managing really large groups of research. So, I mean, you're going to have to determine whether you believe it or you want to say, that's BS, George, what you're saying to me. But these are things that I view as true based upon all my years of experience on it. And so my goal was, on something like Module 1, is just to begin to convey this different way of thinking. Because I don't think I've seen this. I'm sorry, I do think that the maize program probably is closer to this way of thinking than other crops. But that's because you're also in a commercial, more of a commercial world than any other crops that we're dealing with. And so consequently, I think that this is a new way of thinking that could be a paradigm shift, and I want to work as part of EIB to help create this paradigm shift the way we're working. Stella?
I want to add a bit about our experience with IITA CalPE. I think that this process that you're introducing, George, is not something that we've implemented in such detailed framework, but I do think that it's going to be very useful for us to think about moving forward. We've spent the past year, myself and Bukhar and others here in this room, Sari, Mohammed, Emmanuel, I think those are the only folks I see here currently, the breeders from IITA and CalPE NARS. We've spent the past year trying to think about and trying to implement new ways to enhance genetic gain for their programs. And there are so many moving parts. Mm-hmm. There are so many different things that we can do across the program that the different modules are going to help us through this. And really, it all boils down to whether or not we can align and really move forward together with such a framework and such focus that this Module 1 allows. If we can imagine that, in say 3, 4, 6 years, a new CalPE product for West Africa would have such a huge impact. And so I think it's time to try something different. And I think that, I know that I've been working with these guys here for the past year. They are quite eager and ready to do so. So I just really applaud this effort to create a framework that is specific and focused, metric-based. Those are the pieces that are going to help us propel forward into really replacing the products that have been out there for a couple of decades. So,
well, thank you for that validation. And it's not something we just came up with, but it's something that's been used with these high-performing organizations. And I think it's a backbone of the way we work. And unless you have backbones, you are constantly changing. And if you're constantly changing, then you don't really know what works or not because you're not pressure testing it. Okay, so this is, like I said, this goes back to my presentation earlier, that the variety replacement strategy, the product profiles, genetic gains assessment, and the product management is the 3 things that we're working, but beneath making sure that the stage gate gets launched. And so I'll be spending most of my time launching the stage gate so we can have a common language, and working with our colleagues in the different crops so they can begin to look at developing their own stage gates. But I'll tell you some of the weaknesses of the stage gate. So let's go back to your question about the NARS programs and the CG system. So I tried to depict that quite poorly, probably. That really, at the end of the day, the CGIAR is responsible for, it could be responsible, depending upon your strategy, for the early stages. It could be stage 1, 2, and 3, where the NARS program should be intertwined with the CG program to make sure that what we're doing with the CG is in harmony with the NARS programs. And then at the end, this is more of a corn model where the private sector comes in and does the seed multiplication or the product multiplication and then the product introduction. So this isn't going to depict every system that we're represented in this room, but I'm trying to make it generic enough so it makes sense for the whole CG, so that at the end of the day, people can look at a snapshot, or funders look at a snapshot and say, okay, I understand what the CalPE group is doing. And I see this gentleman over here taking pictures. I'd be happy to send this presentation to you. You can have these slide sets here. So it's just the current way we're thinking. So this is really, let me go through it, because it allows me to capture everything I hopefully said. So the product advancement system will become a stepwise core process of managing products and linking the CGIAR and NARS breeding programs as a common language. The process needs oversight to be discussed and determined. And I don't know who was talking about oversight here, maybe it was you. So at one point, the breeders cannot be judge and jury. You know, at one point when the breeders are creating, so at Erie, we tried to implement trait project leads, breeding project leads, and genetic project leads. I believe in a triangle way of working. Okay, so when it comes down to the breeders, when the breeders are launching germplasm either into the NARS system, somebody has to be overseeing that process. Because I know that if no one is watching me, I will lower my standards. And that's why my wife watches me. And so in this case here, we're looking for somebody to oversee it, and it's got to be a buy-in from our upper management within this. And so when we go through this, you understand the value it brings to the upper management as well. The stage gate system will be a process in which products are advanced and pipeline is managed. So we also have, or we will be implementing a trait pipeline, because, like I said, everything could be done in a pipeline. So in a trait, you were talking about a new disease resistance. Trait is a 1 through 6. So at 6, we have validation, we have molecular markers in place. In the Erie system, that doesn't go to the breeder, it goes to the operational team. And the operational team is responsible for back crossing that trait into the varieties that the breeder wants. And it's overseen by one of our genetic project leads, Damian Platten. When Damian has that in the background, he then gives it to a breeder, who then submits it, who then uses it in stage gate 2. But the beauty of all this is, I know that when the trait program hits a stage gate 6, we have molecular markers, it's been validated, and now we just have to put it into the background with the operational team. So that stage gate system can be used across products and pipelines managed in anything we do. The advancement process is recommended to occur twice a year, only because it makes a sense depending upon your cycles within the crop. Lines being advanced will be judged against the product profile design to replace the market-leading variety, or you will discuss where the market is going and say, this is a product to meet the needs of the changing market. You were first. Well, no, I think I said that it also depends upon your crop. So a lot of times once a year was never enough for the crops that I was managing. So we did it twice a year. And anytime you can have a conversation twice a year with the team, that's good. I think you probably have meetings that twice a year that you actually can do this with. So it depends upon your cycle. It could have, in cassava, it may be only a once a year cycle of advancing products, but that's completely up to you. That's just a suggestion that I've seen from best practices. You seem disappointed. Oh, okay. As like I said, I get that same look from my wife, so I'm completely in tune. I'm completely in tune to that look. Okay.
Thank you. Looking at the cassava improvement program, there are various projects there. Now, taking the Harvest Plus, for example, you know, the key trait is determined because you are talking about nutritious cassava. And your target group, or, you know, the vulnerable women and children, the poor farmers, and communities like that are already also identified. Then, under that project, we have the delivery wing, which will not be safe for other cassava activities. Then, when you get to a stage, you have partners brought together, private sector, farmers, whatever. They come with traits of interest. So, what is running into my mind is like a trade on milliness, which Peter knows. And the milliness is the ability to, you know, cassava that boil and eat. You don't need to pound, you know. It keeps coming on, you know, for most of the meetings. When we meet stakeholders here, they keep mentioning it. When you go, so that there's a market for it, there's a niche that can easily fall in. But you also find that measuring that trait is a bit of a challenge, because you can't just the season changes it, phenotyping it is a bit difficult. So maybe with this stage approach, we'll be able to sort it maybe at the second or whatever. We are trying to get markers.
So that's interesting. Okay, so the whole purpose of the stage gate is that you have the stages and you have the gates. And the gates doesn't allow anything to move through until it meets certain criteria. And you determine what that criteria would be. So at one point, in that particular project, you may not be advancing anything until those quality attributes are put in place, or that they've been checked. You determine what the gates are. So you can be stringent or you could be easy. I tend to think that whatever you do, you have to look at how much product actually flows through the system. So in that particular case where it's biofortification, you may not be replacing varieties. It may be an introduction of new varieties. It's a game changer. So you have to decide what that game changer looks like. But what I know from this process, when I went through it as a breeder, you had to describe what your strategy is. And a lot of times, what this forces you to do is have conversations on what your plans are, what the strategy is. And I don't think what I've seen, we have those conversations enough in a formalized setting. Okay, any other questions before I go on? You're not finished? Oh my God.
Because he said when we don't talk, that means you are going on. There's one that I wanted. Where does pre-breeding come in?
Oh, good question. Okay, so, and I don't have the slide here. So pre-breeding occurs, so you design your products. You realize what your gap products are, and it could be significant that to create a game-changing product, you have to have a certain disease resistance. That actually goes into what stage gate, it would actually go into a different world. It would go into a pre-breeding stage gate. And so what happens is, because you can't mix elite populations with to me, when we bred, we always tried to work with elite populations, and then you brought traits into those elite populations or elite clones. So when it comes to pre-breeding, what's recognized in the product design is we don't have it, and then you have to work separate from it. So it's not part of the variety flow. It's separated from the variety flow. So in the IITA system, Angwa is going to talk about this. I mean, they have a system 1 through 6 for just developing traits and getting markers for the traits. Then that's fit into the breeding program. So this is more working for the purpose of release rather than developing a traits. So it's a separate system. But that doesn't complicate it. Is you don't want to have it messed up, this system here. You just have a separate system where you do pre-breeding. So our trait project leaders should actually, like I said, we have a triangle. Trait project, or breeding project lead, trait project lead, genetic project lead, all working as one team. And the trait project lead should have their own stage gate for developing traits. Because again, the breeder needs to know where those traits are in the system. Michael?
Yeah, I was going to describe that in different words and say that there's still a product profile, but the profile is very different. So for the core breeding program, it's going to be all about replacing the variety. For the trait breeding program, it's all about ensuring that that trait is present in a background that is going to be an elite enough parent for the core program to be able to take it on into its crossing program. George, I don't know how many more slides you got. Like I said, I'm happy to be flexible here.
I know. I just realized that you were asking too many questions, and we'll really slow the process down.
The conversation is great, but we're going to run into the last session is your genetic gains assessment. We're going to run out of time if we're not careful. So
yeah. Okay. So let me go through this, and then we can ask questions at the end. And do you want to take over?
Well,
Or do you want to start after the break?
Yeah, why don't you wrap up this, and then we'll give you the time to wrap it up. Then we'll have a break, and then I can get into mine, then you can finish on genetic gains. Does that sound all right?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Can you hold off on asking questions? Okay. Because you're the ones that's slowing this whole process down. Okay. Okay. This is an example, and again, I can show you these as an example. These are the examples of, I call them PLCs, I should have converted them over to stages, of what we're doing within each one of the stages on a generic way of working. This will then have to be worked into your own crop. The stage gates are the gates where you have the conversation. So as a breeder, some gates are easier to go from one to another. I mean, to go from 1 to 2 basically demonstrates you just have to have product profiles that are meaningful and they're not sitting at the bottom of your desk lining the desk. And so the other thing that I want to look at is part of this process. This was given to me. This was challenged during the Kenya meeting. One of the people that were part of our contributors from former Monsanto said, George, this is really nice to actually understand a snapshot of what the varieties are in the pipeline. Because over here, to this left, the second line is all about the varieties. The first one is all about the ecotype. Then it's the geographic targets that we're hitting. But he said to me, it's really great to have a snapshot of what that looks like in your flow of the products, but it's more important during the presentation of the breeders to actually describe what the pedigrees are behind each one of those. And he was spot on. Good looks, and I always say, what does good look like? Good looks like like when you make this presentation, that you are actually describing what the pedigree is and the reasons why there's enough attributes behind it to advance the line. So I gave you this rule here. I think we actually shoot ourselves in the foot all the time. And if you get a chance, if you've never seen a TED Talks, you should get on the internet, Google TED Talks, and Google this particular guy, and he will give you the psychology of choice being a paradox. Because when you get too many choices, you don't do anything. And so the other thing is, these are the benefits of a formalized system. It provides a roadmap to all stakeholders, from the DG all the way to the donors, all the way to anybody working within the system. It adds discipline to a chaotic, sometimes hidden endeavor. It promotes visible, transparent processes, which I don't think we are noted for. It establishes gates where critical decisions are made: kill, no kill, advance. It incorporates cross-functional attributes, and then an adjacent function to work in parallel, so that when you are advancing something, then everybody knows that the advancement process is coming. And so everybody knows that these are coming out into the marketplace, and then you're priming the understanding or the seed systems or the multiplication system. But that's critical. Within the IITA system, we have a person working in India. It's critical for him to know what's coming out so he could begin to trial it on a broader level. And having a common process that means no missteps. So here's the critical success functions. First, leadership support, and then you have to have executive sponsorship. So I am really not supposed to be talking to this community here. And why I asked your DG to stay and listen to my presentation, because he and the DG and the deputy DGs need to hear this, because that is where the discipline will come from. And so my audience for this is management rather than the breeders, because at the breeder level, you're here to nominate and advance based upon the criteria you have for the product profile. And then it's making sure that you have enough resources. Somebody mentioned resources over here. In this particular case, I think we're going to be able to get by with the same sources that you're working, because it's just a different way of working. Strategic implementation approach. Okay, so at the end, you mentioned this, I can't remember your name again? David, you mentioned this. The strategy of the stage gate is going to be dependent upon what your delivery is. And the delivery is different from one CG center to the other. So that's a strategic decision on how you're going to run the stage gate. We have to have effective communication, and we have to have track of performance. So I think that you have answered most of those questions, and if not, we can tackle any of those questions. But I think the group so far has been really, I think you've dug into this quite a bit. So I'm going to spend about, what time do we end? Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to end here because the most important thing of landing this across the CJ was the stage gates. And so if anybody has any questions of this different way of thinking, this different way of working, and Michael, I apologize. I actually kept looking at my watches. This is for me to walk, and this is for me to tell what time it is. And I thought it was at...
I think there's a bit of a miscalculation in the agenda, which has kind of screwed us a little. But
okay.
So it's not all your fault. But also, we've got 15 minutes at the end of the day for questions, and we've been having some great questions during the session. So I think we're fine.
Okay.
If you're happy to.
I'm going to end right here because what's more important for me, step one is landing the stage gates as a way of working, and then the goal is to begin to develop this across the CG and to our NARS partnership. So I can take one last question. Go ahead.
It was really nice to hear, and what struck me when just the slide before, the resources. And you said it, like if you see all the breeding programs across all CG centers, probably maize is one which is well-funded, commercial scale, and okay, resources are always less for any breeding program, but in general, now coming into EIB and different modules, how do you see that when we have so many crops at different stages with different challenges, different breeding cycles, different requirements, how do you position yourself within EIB or within different modules to take care of these needs of different
First of all, I'm not taking care of any of your needs. Okay. I mean, again, no, because at one point, I have to teach you how to catch a fish, and you have to catch the fish. And so at one point, I can only show you what best practices are, and I can give you suggestions on how we did things. Because we do have product management and project management, and maybe you have project management with... So a lot of that is incorporated into the project management as a way of working. And it becomes more and more of a transparent situation. But I think what happens is when you begin to think about this at 2 in the morning like I do, you'll see a solution on how to implement this. Now, granted, the Monsanto or Syngenta or the Pioneers of the world, they have somebody who... there's a job that they will track this. But I'm not asking for that type of tracking ability. I'm asking for, this is a transparency that would be good practices within each breeding program. And the fact that you're talking and you're giving a reason why you're advancing is I think, basic. But it's not something that I think we're very strong in, but we could be strong. So don't get hung up on that. And once you have this in your mind, you bring this into new projects for potential funding. So gates were enlightened enough that when I run this past them, they say, okay, this makes sense. So in your next project, make sure you put this. I'm not expecting this to happen like that. So year one is just sensitizing and getting it on board. We still have 5 years in this project, but we have to walk before we can run. Okay. So thank you so much for listening. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going
to try and be back at 3:25 if we can. So just have a quick coffee break, and we'll get back into it.
Okay, and then Michael's is going to lead, and then thank you so much. It was really enjoyable.
George will be back later in the afternoon.
Okay.
And you'll be here for my session as well, right?
Right.
Yeah, good.
Okay, thank you.